So, I've spent a long time pushing Mythic Plus in World of Warcraft. I've been a tank main since Legion, and while I've always played pretty casually in terms of time investment, I put thousands of hours into dungeons, learning routes, fighting timers, and trying to climb as high as I can. And recently, Fellowship released in early access, and it immediately caught my attention. It's a multiplayer online dungeon adventure. Think of the core philosophy of Mythic Plus, but built from the ground up around small instance PvE, loot progression, scaling difficulty, and player skill development. There's no leveling, no open world, no daily chore list, just dungeon gameplay and progression. I've been maining Helena tank, and as of recording this, I've reached Eternal mode, just over 6,000 rating. And I'm aiming to push to 10,000 before reset and unlock everything this season has to offer. This is my experience so far, what I think the game does incredibly well, and where I think it still needs to grow. Oh god, where are they going?
A lot coming. There's a lot coming.
What is this, NDI routes?
Oh god.
Do a grip low.
Coming from WoW, the transition into Fellowship felt natural. Helena immediately reminded me of a warrior tank with a little paladin-esque flavour sprinkled in. The rotation is straightforward, the defensive tools are clear, and the gameplay loop rewards planning, aggression, and knowing when to pull big versus when to pace yourself. The biggest early impression I had was comfort. I didn't feel lost. I felt like I walked into a familiar house just with different furniture. But what really surprised me was how much slower and more controlled the pacing felt in a good way. WoW's APM requirements are incredibly high these days. Fellowship still values awareness, cooldown management, and positioning, but it's slightly less frantic, and I think that's a positive. It lets the mechanics breathe. One thing the game nails is being approachable while still leaving room for mastery. Everyone gets loot at the end of dungeons. You can repeat any dungeon at any difficulty without worrying about breaking your key or wasting time leveling it back up. You aren't punished for practicing, and when you're climbing rating, the game constantly trickles progression at a satisfying rate. Gear upgrades, weapon traits, talent points unlocking for more build depth. It genuinely feels good to log in and play, even if you're not pushing the bleeding edge every season. The lack of punishment for failure is huge. If you wipe or deplete a run, it's not a setback. It's just learning and trying again. That's a big difference from WoW, where a failed key can sometimes feel demoralizing or like wasted time. The dungeons scale nicely, and once you start pushing harder levels and capstone content, you start seeing how well thought out the encounter mechanics are. Bosses have distinct abilities, affixes, force adaptation, and there are some genuinely fun routing decisions to make. The capstones, in particular, stand out. When we timed a ransack of Drakheim on our second attempt after missing the first by a whole 27 minutes, it was a genuine rush. It felt earned. It felt like progression, and we deserved it. The reward structure also shines. There's seasonal cosmetics, unlocks, and upgrades, which are constant goals. Everyone leaves a dungeon with something. Compared to WoW, where end of dungeon loot can still feel like a lottery, Fellowship's system feels modern and respectful of players' time. From a tank perspective, the core gameplay loop is quite satisfying. Threat generation is strong and consistent, defensive cycling is meaningful, and knowing routes matters just like it does in WoW. If you're tanking, your job is still to be the strategic leader of the dungeon. There are some areas I'd like to see evolve. I do miss having more on-demand crowd control. WoW tanks have a lot in the way of influencing the battlefield directly, and here it's slightly more limited. That said, it does reinforce teamwork and makes coordinated groups feel rewarding. I also wouldn't mind seeing tank damage scale a little bit closer to around 70% of a DPS player. Tanks feeling impactful offensively helps the pace and the flow of dungeon pushing. And on the flip side, healers here can output a bit too much damage in my opinion, which could eventually warp the balance if not monitored. Overall, tanks matter, healers matter, DPS matter, the trinity feels properly respected either way. One thing I want to touch on as well is the learning curve in Fellowship, because I think it strikes a really healthy balance between being approachable and still rewarding mastery. When you first jump in, especially if you've been tanking in games now, you can pick up the basics pretty quickly. You learn your rotation, you learn how to time your defensives, and you start to understand enemy abilities and what needs to be interrupted. But as you push higher, the game really starts to respect player skill. Pool planning matters, cooldown discipline matters, knowing when to go big and when to slow the pace down becomes a real decision and not just something you do out of habit. You start to recognize patterns, plan around to fixes, and anticipate boss mechanics instead of reacting to them. The further you climb, the more the game rewards knowledge and calm decision making over just raw reaction speed or spamming buttons. And that ties into the build system as well. When you first look at talents and weapons, it's very clean and readable, but as you progress, things start to branch. You unlock more talent points as you push rating, and weapons introduce their own traits. It gives you room to tune your build for the content you're doing. It isn't overwhelming, it's progressive and satisfying. You feel like you're improving your character and your gameplay at the same time instead of just inflating stats. From a tank perspective specifically, this is a mindset game. You set the pace, you build the plan, you're thinking 1 or 2 pulls ahead, and you're constantly balancing aggression with stability. It's that same feeling of responsibility and leadership that drew me to tanking in WoW. You aren't just taking hits, you're controlling space, predicting danger, making micro decisions that determine whether a run feels clean or chaotic. And when you get it right, it feels great. It feels earned. Even in early access, the skill curve shows. When you play with a consistent group, everyone gets familiar with routing, pulls, interrupts, and defensive timings. When you play with randoms, runs are still absolutely doable, but there's noticeable variance just like any team-based PvE game. And yes, there are toxic players, but nothing out of the ordinary. Most people, especially high Mythic Plus players trying the game, are respectful, curious, and learning. One feature I think the game needs sooner rather than later is an in-game group finder. The current vote-based matchmaking can feel slow and inconsistent at high level when you're hunting a specific dungeon. A proper tool used responsibly would streamline grouping without replacing coordinated play. If you enjoy feeling rewarded, and who doesn't, Fellowship over-delivers here. There's loot every run, the progression systems are layered cleanly, seasonal incentives are stacked nicely. It genuinely outclasses WoW here. You always feel like your time is building towards something meaningful. And because you can swap heroes freely, you avoid the ult problem that WoW has wrestled with forever. You aren't starting from zero punishment-wise just because you want variety. The biggest concern long-term is balance and maintenance. Right now, the roles feel really healthy, and the leaderboard spread looks solid. As more heroes, weapons, and seasons release, that juggling act gets harder. WoW's balance complexity shows how tricky that problem can become. I hope the developers stay proactive, transparent, and consistent on tuning. The foundation is incredibly strong, and the future depends on keeping it that way. So, after hitting Eternal mode, pushing over 6,000 rating, and investing a lot of time into Fellowship already, here's where I stand. Fellowship doesn't feel like a WoW replacement. It's totally different to an MMORPG. There's so much more in MMORPGs, and this just can't compare to that. But it feels like a focused alternative built around one of WoW's best systems without all the extra layers and grind. Accessible, rewarding, and skill expression focused. It respects your time, it has depth without overwhelming you. Most importantly, it's fun. If you're someone who loves coordinated dungeon gameplay, progression, improving as a player, and pushing difficulty just for the satisfaction of improvement, this game is absolutely worth trying. I'm genuinely excited to keep pushing and hopefully hit that 10,000 rating goal before the seasonal reset. If the devs continue refining systems, adding heroes and dungeons thoughtfully, and listening to the community, I can see Fellowship carving out a really strong home for players like me long term. I would love to hear your thoughts on the game, whether you are already playing it or seriously considering playing it. Otherwise, thanks for watching. See you later. Oh! I completely forgot about the fucking anchor.
Oh no.